Hello and welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
I am Adam Summers, and you are here in Season 6. That's right. We continue to roll through the early stages of Season 6 here in the free feed of Wrestling at Random, where, if you've been listening, you know the theme is somehow even more, by a considerable margin, even more wrestling than in Season 5. Some 29,000 professional wrestling events, television shows, etc., spanning the decades, the time-space continuum, have been dumped into the randomizer. Close to 60,000 hours, I think, of professional wrestling at this point. It picks a show for us to watch, and that's what we do. We watch it, and we review it here on the podcast. Jeremy, I was very, very excited when the randomizer pulled for us an episode from December 1983 of World Class Championship Wrestling. I would have been about 2.5 years old when this aired. I am certain that I saw this show. Like, I don't remember it, but there is no way I didn't see this show as a 2.5-year-old, because this is literally right when I started watching wrestling. This and Mid-South, as I've said before, these were the two TV programs we got in New Orleans, where I lived for the first 3 or 4 years of my life. And I can guarantee you, me and my dad were sitting in front of the television set watching this episode of World Class, which did not emanate from the Sportatorium. This is, in fact, several matches from World Class Championship Wrestling Thanksgiving Night Spectacular, taped that night, Thanksgiving evening, at the Reunion Arena, upwards of 19,000 fans in attendance.
World Class. We've visited World Class a few times. We can go back to Season 1, Episode 3 of this podcast, if you can believe it. We reviewed the Christmas Star Wars episode of World Class from 1981. So, we reviewed that. We reviewed TV from 84, 85, 87. The randomizer loves World Class more than it loves ECW, that's for sure.
But we get at least one a season. I can confirm, by the way, that there's it's very unlikely that as a 7-month-old I was propped up in front of the TV watching that Christmas Star Wars 1981.
And in our bonus feed, we do bonus content as well. Over there, we have episode 98 of the bonus content. There's over 200 episodes, if you can believe it, of bonus content over there. $5, you get the entire back catalog of all those extra episodes that are not in the free feed. Unbelievable. What a value. Episode 98 over there is July 23rd, 1983. Just a few months prior to the episode we're about to review here. That episode featured an awesome Jimmy Garvin and Sunshine as David Von Erich's valet for a day.
Yes, one of our patrons, I can't remember which patron it was, chose that for us to watch. They support the show at patreon.com/wrestling at random at that tier where they're able to choose something for us to watch. They chose that for us to watch. We had a great time reviewing it. Here, as you said, though, the randomizer doing us a solid and picking peak World Class and picking a show with actual stars on it, star versus star matches, not from the Sportatorium, but here at Reunion Arena. I do have the card in front of me in terms of the matches on this show, in terms of the live show for people in attendance that did not air on this particular week of television, which I believe was, is it December 10th, 1983?
December 10th, 1983 episode of television. I believe it's available where you get your classic WWE content, as they own these libraries. That is the TV episode we're going to review. And like you mentioned, they would take some of the big Reunion Arena shows and break them up into multi-week television episodes.
Which is very different from other territories. And we've had a lot of territory requests on the bonus feed. Obviously, we've had a bunch over the years here on the free feed as well. And if you've listened to those shows, or if you're familiar with territory television, very often, like, in Atlanta, they'd be, promoting the Omni show for weeks, but you would not see the Omni show. You'd be lucky if you got clips of that. Same thing for Florida is another example. A lot of the territories you never got that, whereas here, like you said, they use the major shows as a couple weeks of TV. So very different, but clearly the strategy worked. It did not hurt attendance at Reunion Arena on Thanksgiving night by people knowing that they were going to show this on TV. So as I mentioned, the other matches on this show that we will not review because they're not on the week of TV that we're watching and reviewing: Black Gordman, Boris Zukov, and Tonga John, an amazing name, who is a young barbarian taking on the team of Johnny Mantell, Mike Reed, and Jose Lothario.
Former Bare Knuckles champion.
Yes, in that episode 3, season 1, the world-class show that we reviewed, where it was Ernie Ladd and Jose Lothario for the Nux title, which is really what started our deep and abiding love on this podcast with the big cat Ernie Ladd. After that, the missing link against Freebird Buddy Roberts. Also, Mike Von Erich against Skandar Akbar.
Which may or may not have been the debut of Mike Von Erich, based on the commentary we heard on this show.
They said he looked very impressive, and I find that impossible to believe, and that makes me sad as someone who literally my childhood heroes were the Von Erichs, but Mike was not great. The NWA American Tag Team Championship, the Super Destroyers, Super Destroyer 1 and Super Destroyer 2, who are not Super Destroyer and Mass Superstar.
No, they are not. We've had
a lot of over, particularly on the bonus feed as of late. It is Bill and Scott Irwin under masks defending the tag titles against the team of Iceman King Parsons and Junkyard Dog. It is the two of my heroes from the two territories I grew up on, World Class and Mid-South, coming together here to go after the NWA American Tag Team titles. And then the main event of this show in the arena, again, not on the TV episode that we were reviewing here, Loser Leaves Town Steel Cage match. I guess you could say the culmination, or one of the many culminations, of the Freebirds versus Von Erich's feud. It is Michael Hayes against Kerry Von Erich.
We will see a lot of Kerry Von Erich on this show.
Yes.
Which is crazy that he's in the main event and he keeps coming out throughout this show. Now, usually we like to give you the history of the promotion we're about to cover, but like we mentioned, we've talked about World Class a bunch of times. So that's season 1, episode 3. We go deep into the history of World Class. So check out that episode for that information. Also, the bonus content for the 1984 Parade of Champions show. We go into a lot of detail and history around the Von Erichs themselves. And then, so here I want to make sure that we just get into a little bit about, some of the things that were going on in 1983. We have reviewed a lot of shows in the free feed, free to you right now, in the way you're listening to this podcast right now. You can go back and listen to a bunch of other shows that happened in 1983. It was quite the year when we look at the Mid-Atlantic shows that we reviewed, the Georgia Championship Wrestling, the big cage match with Buzz Sawyer and Tommy Rich. You can look at all of the Mid-Atlantic stuff that was going on in 1983. This was
2 episodes of WWF television that you forced me to watch. So if you're a new listener, you may not know this story. The randomizer, it pulls stuff from WWE Network, from New Japan World, all these places. It also pulls from all the wrestling that's on YouTube and other YouTube-like streaming services. And what it pulled was a YouTube file, a YouTube video that was 2 back-to-back episodes, 2 weeks in a row, of World Wrestling Federation, Worldwide Wrestling Federation, whatever you want to call it, 1983. And I said to Jeremy, we're just going to do one of these, right? Like, it's one TV show. He's like, no, let's do both. And I begrudgingly said, okay. And then we proceeded to watch back-to-back and have to review in the same episode 2 nearly identical episodes of that territory's television show. Was not that they sent in the same tape to the station 2 weeks in a row. It was just that the television was so uninspired in that territory in 1983 that they were virtually indistinguishable. There were no major angles. It was the same 10 guys on the show. It was just, and the same guys in squash matches, they just swapped which enhancement talent, which jobbers they wrestled across 2 weeks. It was not one of our finest moments, dare I say.
Mistakes were made, I think, is the
Yes.
proper term.
Never
I was
again
wrong.
is a phrase that is used in a lot of different ways, and that is the way I use it to, if we ever encounter that same scenario.
I was wrong. You were right. And if you want to enjoy the fruits of our labor, you want to enjoy us suffering through 2 of these episodes in one podcast, that podcast is Season 4, Episode 18, Championship Wrestling, WWF Championship Wrestling from 1983. But here, back to our territory. We're in Dallas, Texas. Like I mentioned, sold out Reunion Arena, that is an NBA arena. That is a full size. That's like nearly 20,000. And we open the show. We've got Bill Mercer on commentary, Mark Lawrence as our ring announcer, and we get a video package. We see Kimala's attack on David Von Erich. And then we see highlights of the Masked Avenger throwing a super kick and getting a win over Jimmy Garvin. Apparently, Jimmy Garvin was avoiding putting his title on the line against the gentleman Chris Adams. He was wrestling a match against the Masked Avenger, who was Chris Adams under the hood, and scored the big win with a super kick, which will lead to our championship match later on this show.
It's funny as well, in recent months over on the bonus feed, we reviewed an episode of Championship Wrestling from Florida from 1983 with the Midnight Rider, Dusty Rhodes, under a mask. You're not supposed to think it's Dusty Rhodes. Different circumstances that led to that, and certainly different championship implications, but it's just interesting to see another territory doing basically at the same time a slightly different shade on the same angle. But you mentioned the main event, which will be for the American title. Going into this show, I did not realize when I started watching, this is going to be from Reunion Arena. And as Bill Mercer runs down the card for tonight, it's like, wow, this is a big show. We are getting Kimala against David Von Erich. We are getting, as you mentioned, Jimmy Garvin defending the American title against Chris Adams. And we are also getting, in Freebirds versus Von Erich's Warfare, Terry Gordy against Kevin Von Erich, all on this episode of television.
We see that rundown you just described on the screen, and then we head to a commercial. After the commercial break, Kevin Von Erich is in the ring to take on fabulous Freebird Terry Gordy. The girls screaming for Kevin Von Erich. Sounds like a Beatle.
It's whatever you think about Iron Claw, or if you never really had seen World Class and you see Iron Claw and you think like they were exaggerating in that film, in that movie, how much of a cultural phenomenon in Dallas, Texas, the Von Erichs were. They were not. No. And in some ways, you watch that movie and it does not come close to capturing the fervor and the intensity of the fan support for the Von Erichs. It is, whenever the Von Erichs are in the ring on this show, in any situation, it's just this constant, like, it's weird to call it a murmur, but there's this constant level of volume of girls and women screaming. And then when either Kevin is getting, one of the Von Erichs is getting beaten down or they're making a comeback, it just gets louder, but it never stops. It's unbelievable. And there really is nothing even close to a modern comp for what the Von Erichs were in this territory in this time period.
Quick trip to Fashion Corner before we get into the action. I love Kevin Von Erich. Fantastic, fun wrestler every time. This look is my least favorite look of any wrestler, where Kevin is wearing white trunks, no knee pads, tape, shoes. This is a terrible look. White really makes it look like tighty-whitey underwear.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I'm so used to it because I grew up on it that it doesn't affect me the way it affects you. But objectively, yes, there is no worse look for a wrestler than just white briefs and literally nothing else. Meanwhile, Terry Gordy
it's also a bad look when they throw on a T-shirt with that look. I call that the dad go back to bed look.
Yeah, it was particularly bad when that was Buck Zumoff.
Oh, no.
Never good. And we've unfortunately had to detail the travels and travails of Buck Zumoff on this podcast. Terry Gordy, Fashion Corner, is in a sequined jacket, which is always wild to see for Terry Gordy. And as I said, like, the crowd is screaming so much that you can barely hear the ring announcer say, "The high-flying Kevin Von Erich." And this is not one of those territory shows from the late 70s or early or even in the mid-80s where the production values are bad and maybe the microphone isn't working. This is, by a significant margin, the best production value of any American-based wrestling program on television. It is better than what you would see from the WWF, and obviously during this era, but even into 85 and 86, it is, to me, like, it's the gold standard. The way this arena, the Reunion Arena, is shot, the way the ring is lit, it looks like it's out of a movie. It really is something. And again, we also, this being on WWE Network, they have access to the master tapes. Like, this is pristine video quality and the highest quality production you could imagine for 1983.
Action starts with Kevin working an arm. Gordy hits a big boot, tries another. He missed, gets himself hung up on the top rope. Kevin gives him a shot, knocking Gordy over the top to the floor. Every time we talk about Terry Gordy, every time we watch one of his matches in this prime era of Gordy, he's always like doing something where you're like, man, what an agile big man. He's always, he's one of those guys where you're in awe every time you see him. He always does something that is spectacular.
Well, agile, and spectacular, but also we talk on this podcast a lot about the little things. In this match, Terry Gordy is a living, breathing example of what wrestling was in 1983 and what things from that era have been completely lost. All the little, like, his yelling and selling and flailing as he's in holds, his ability to be this big, scary, athletic big man that also is not afraid to make himself look ridiculous and look like a fool to get the desired reaction from the crowd. It is something else. It's, it almost doesn't even fit in modern wrestling.
No.
But it's so fun to watch. And it also is fascinating because you talked about prime Terry Gordy. He's still very young here. This is a prime for him. But you think about, 7, 8 years later, 9 years later, him in All Japan with Dr. Death Steve Williams, and he's completely different. He's a great wrestler, but in a totally different way. There isn't the flailing, over-the-top, wild bumping, and borderline comedic selling. Not because he can't do it in 1991, but because that's not where he's wrestling calls for. His ability to be that great in two completely different styles is incredible. And, you mentioned the bonus feed. We've got stuff, I believe sometime in the second half of 2024, we did these shows where it was Terry Gordy as like a 15-year-old.
15 years old wrestling on a TV program we reviewed, yeah.
And looking, obviously not to the level he was in 1983 or 1991, but it was so glaringly obvious, even in a jobber plus enhancement role as a 15-year-old, that he had something that almost no one else on the same television program had.
Kevin starts working over Gordy's hand and thumb to prevent Gordy from using the spike. We get Gordy cutting off Kevin with a clothesline, dropping him throat first over the top rope. Kevin answers back, dropping Gordy throat first over the top rope. He misses a drop kick. Gordy goes for the spike. Kevin moves. After missing the spike, Kevin puts on the claw. The iron claw is on for the first time. Gordy then throws him over the top rope, and the announcers are saying it was dangerously close to a disqualification.
Yeah, it very well could have been a disqualification. We should also mention the spike. This is not Kevin Sullivan with Wing Kanemaru on a cover of a wrestling magazine in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. The spike is his thumb. He learned this on one of his early trips to Japan. And came back, and it's basically it's a thumb version of like the Tongan death grip or the mandible claw. That's the idea here.
Yes, less of the, not quite the Solo Sikoa in modern times does the strike with the thumb, but this is more of a hold as you described.
I assume that is a modern world wrestling entertainment reference, which would be why I'm I'm struggling to keep up with you there.
Yes, that's not for you. It's for our audience and our listeners.
Understood.
So, we then have Gordy suplexing him back in. Terry Gordy comes off the top with a splash, but missed. And then the finish comes where Kevin tries a babyface splash, but Gordy got the knees up.
If you're a longtime listener of this podcast, you understand that one of the most immutable rules of professional wrestling, particularly through the 80s and even into the 90s, is if you are a babyface, and if you are a babyface who is fit, as they would say,
yes.
in the UK, you're
unfit.
You are in good shape. Your body fat is low, and you try a babyface splash, particularly when it's not off the top rope, it's just running or standing. The opponent will always get the knees up. It is a you can't powerbomb Kidman type of deal.
Kevin comes off the top. He does a twist in the air, hitting a crossbody for the pin. Buddy Roberts immediately hits the ring. Kevin attacks him. Gordy attacks Kevin with a cowboy boot shot to the head. They're double teaming the hand. Payback to Kevin, double teaming the hand and trying to prevent the Iron Claw here. He's stomping away at the hand until Kerry and David Von Erich come and make the save. The place goes bonkers for David and Kerry coming out to make the save.
Completely insane. Like breaking your headphones, your earbuds level of screaming from the crowd here. Fun stuff. Obviously, this isn't like, I can't imagine this was the best Kevin Von Erich versus Terry Gordy match ever, but it was a fun example of what these two guys wrestling in a big arena, with a wild, loud crowd, of what that looks like. This was great fun. Obviously, to get to see this on a weekly television show was awesome as well. Kevin Von Erich with that twisting reverse crossbody off the top certainly passed the Tim Horner test and then some for a variation of this move. I was also amused by Bill Mercer on commentary, who I enjoy, but he's that classic like local guy, local newsman, made wrestling announcer that just sometimes makes up names of moves because he can't remember or doesn't know. After Kevin Von Erich hit like a regular crossbody, he then hits a couple arm drags into an arm bar that Bill Mercer calls, direct quote, a body slam and a pin. It was an arm drag, and he went into a submission hold, not a pin.
David Von Erich is interviewed at ringside pre-show. The claw is not banned. He's going to use it tonight on the head of Kimala. I always forget that David is the best promo of the Von Erichs.
He's the best promo. He's the best wrestler of them. He's the most wrestler of them in that, like, he feels like a guy, and we've seen him in other territories. He feels of the three at this time like the guy who, whether he was Fritz Von Erich's kid or not, he would have been a big star in pretty much any territory. I also liked how he actually called Kimala instead of Kimala, which everyone else on the show does, and they spell it Kimala, which always just annoys me going back again. I don't know why. I guess it's the copy editor in me still. Also, at the end of this promo, this interview, I should say, Bill Mercer was really stumbling trying to close this out. It was odd because he's usually really slick, and he was having some trouble here. But I do like the idea of like throwing it to these interviews that are ringside before the show as the fans are filing in. It's different than the normal studio desk backdrop as the show is going on live to tape.
David Von Erich versus Kimala with Skandar Akbar and Friday, who is the version of Kim Chi at this point, in his corner. Kimala slaps his belly, so you know we are underway. And David threatens the claw. Kimala remembers this, has fear about the claw. They're trading shots. Kimala gets the advantage with chops and chokes. David chopped over the top rope to the floor. Somehow he gets busted open. I missed this completely.
Yeah, this was he basically just went under the ring, cut himself, and came back out. Like, there's no logical explanation. I guess you could say maybe in the tumble over the top, he hit his head on the apron and that busted him open. He did hit a really nice standing drop kick earlier, a big knee lift. Again, he's just a pro wrestler. Like, he's not a body guy. He's not a wild high flyer. He's just a tall pro wrestler. I was also amused. I love the description from Bill Mercer, like really getting over like how much the crowd is in favor of David Von Erich as opposed to Kimala here. He says 100% of the fans are 100% in favor of David Von Erich. I enjoyed that. I also enjoyed how while Kimala was throwing his wacky chops, Bill Mercer described them both as judo chops and jiu-jitsu chops. He really raised the bar there for describing martial arts that do not utilize chops as having chops. Again, one of my favorite conventions of old school territory wrestling commentary.
It's so funny. It got me thinking of other martial arts that do not have chops and just having a running list.
Yes. And I was like, why was that not the week after the Nitro at the United Center where Jericho was in the ring with his list of 1,001 holds? He should have come back with 1,001 versions of chops.
We were both in the building separately that night, right?
Yes.
Yeah, nice.
Did not know of each other's existence.
Back inside the ring here, Kimala stays on the attack. He's biting the cut, hits a big splash, gets a 2 count because he's a heel and he's not fit, so he can hit the splash with ease.
Surprising that wasn't the finish here. I mean, that was Kamala's big finish.
David gets the claw on Kimala. Kimala starts bleeding from the claw, which is always one of my favorite things. You squeeze the head so much that they start bleeding from the forehead. It's
a very Fritz Von Erich thing. I think we've seen clips of that before on this show, so it was cool to see that here with David.
Friday, the handler of Kimala, puts Kamala's foot on the rope to break the hold. David puts the claw on Friday, then puts the claw on Akbar. Kimala comes to the rescue of his manager, Akbar. Akbar's choking David, and here's Kerry back to make the save. He slams Kimala. We're told that David wins by disqualification, and because Akbar had a $10,000 bounty that nobody could slam his man Kimala. Because of that slam, Akbar owes Kerry Von Erich $10,000.
We get a replay immediately afterwards to serve, as Bill Mercer says, a visual proof of the fact that Kerry Von Erich did, in fact, slam Kimala. This wasn't a hip lock like Bobby Heenan was screaming when Lex Luger slammed Yokozuna on the aircraft carrier. I don't know how this is binding because it happened after the match was thrown out. The highlight of all of this post-match craziness was Kerry Von Erich running in and leaping over Bill Mercer and the production person next to him at the announce booth. The announce table is literally next to the ring, like pushed up against the ring. That was a very cool visual. Again, as you said, another Kerry Von Erich run-in. Crowd went completely insane again. I enjoyed that Bill Mercer, when David got knocked all the way out to the floor, Bill Mercer was legitimately worried that Kimala was going to hit a plancha. He had gone up to the second rope. It looked like he may go to the top and take a dive or do a dive to the floor. That was funny. I also could not help but think about how some things are so different 8 years later and then also the same. That in the WWF in 1991, we saw on that, or I guess in 1993, 10 years later, and that bashed in the USA Coliseum on video that we reviewed in recent months on the bonus feed.
That was our episode 1 of this season.
Right.
Just 2 episodes ago, we saw that.
That was just 2 episodes here on the free feed. My God, you are correct. Even crazier that we had 1993 or maybe 92, depending on when that match was taped, but 93 Kimala as a baby face who had been rescued from Kimchi. Who was his manager on
Slick,
that show?
The Doctor of Style.
Doctor of Style Slick. And it's babyface Kimala looking the same, doing all the same moves, challenging Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental title. Wrestling is crazy.
I wonder if we have to rebrand the theme of season 6 of Wrestling at Random to be the Kimala season. 29,000 opportunities and all we pull are Kimala matches.
You will know that if we get an All Japan episode that has Kimala or maybe 2 Kimalas again.
Kimala 1 and 2.
Or maybe we'll get an ECW episode with a rare appearance of Kimala 2 as Uganda. There was the brief time that Kimala was a part of the Dungeon of Doom. Maybe we can get that.
Oh my God.
There's plenty, a terrifying amount of possibilities for this to become the Kimala season.
Oh no. Randomizer. See, I got all excited. I was all happy that the randomizer brought us a good episode because this is the same randomizer that brought us 1987 Dying Days of the Territory World Class with champion Al Perez.
It was a terrible time for World Class. It was sad to watch, but it gave me my favorite comp that I use 2 or 3 times a day, whether I'm talking to anyone or just in my head, of comparing people and promotions to World Class having Al Perez as champion in 1987.
Back to 1983 and back to Reunion Arena. It is main event time for the TV show. Again, the main event of the in-arena show was Kerry Von Erich and Michael P.S. Hayes in a cage. Here, this is the main event of our TV show this week. It is for the American Heavyweight Championship. The champion, gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, with his manager, Precious, who is his shoot wife, his legit wife, Precious. And he'd been ducking the challenger, gentleman Chris Adams. Can duck him no longer. Will be taking on the gentleman Chris Adams, who's brought Sunshine with to be in his corner to help neutralize any interference from Precious.
They legitimately hated each other, Precious and Sunshine. If you've never seen the Chris Adams episode of Dark Side of the Ring, It is a must watch. It's a wild episode just because Chris Adams, I mean, among everyone in World Class and everyone in the 80s, Chris Adams may have been one of, if not the wildest wrestling characters outside of the ring in terms of everything he got involved in. But yeah, they did not like each other at all. And that certainly comes through as we watch this match. We get interviews, again, pre-taped interviews from before the show started with Bill Mercer individually interviewing both Chris Adams and gorgeous Jim Garvin. I'm always amused because I always think it was Jimmy Garvin. He's just Jim Garvin here. And then, we go to the ring. Jim Garvin in all white gear and a white long fur vest is an incredible look, particularly with that big permed brown hair and the mustache. He's another one of those guys when you say, like, what is a professional wrestler in the 1980s? And if you don't think bodybuilder, you think just ridiculous absurdity, and Jim Garvin definitely fits that here.
Adams and Sunshine are out, and they are loved. Now, not like Von Erich loved, but still super popular baby faces.
Pretty close. Chris Adams was, of all the, like, Von Erich adjacent baby faces, when he was a baby face, to my recollection, he was the most popular. I would say Iceman King Parsons was close, but Chris Adams had a near Von Erich level of love from the crowd. You know, the whole British gentleman who's moved to Texas and embraced, that whole culture. Obviously, there was a whole deal with him and Jesus, why am I drawing a blank on his tag team partner, Gino Hernandez? My God, how could I forget Gino? Another Dark Side of the Ring episode for
Can't
the
miss.
ages.
Yeah.
Can't miss as well, but him as a heel, him as a baby face. The other thing that's really notable during the introductions, again, the production value. We've got the cameras in the ring, 2 cameramen handling a camera and each shooting the introductions of the wrestlers, almost like something you would see in a big boxing show or a modern UFC. Here, having that on a wrestling show in 1983 is very, very impressive.
Adams in control early, got a roll up for 2 count. Garvin catches him, charging into the corner with a knee. Garvin on the attack. He's yelling at Sunshine while he's on the attack. Camel clutch by Garvin. Adams powers up to his feet. Garvin's on his back, and he drops forward, ramming Garvin's face into the corner.
The only thing about the start of this match that was a little annoying was that it was very, very similar to the start of the Kevin Von Erich Terry Gordy match. Almost identical. Obviously, the characters are different.
Could use some agenting on the show.
Yes. This definitely. I'm usually not a big fan of the agenting, but here definitely could have used that. We also get early on in the match, we hear that the next holiday spectacular, as they describe it, which will be Christmas night, It will feature Ric Flair, who has just won the NWA World Championship from Harley Race at Starrcade, will defend against David Von Erich as one of the big matches, one of the main events coming up on Christmas night.
We get a monkey flip, and Adams nails Garvin with the super kick, and Garvin goes to the outside. This, if you have never seen a Chris Adams super kick, it is not the super kick you're imagining. It's better. It's insane that no one does the Chris Adams lunging super kick.
No one else should even be able to call this a super kick. If you watch AEW television, when the Young Bucks hit their version of a super kick, it's called a super kick. Everyone else, when they do it, the announcers call it a thrust kick. They should not be allowed to call it a super kick. This Chris Adams super kick, which he used all the time, it's like a float kick, a pump kick, whatever you want to say, but super kick style. And he covers like the entire width of the ring as he leaps into it. It's also amusing because people complain in modern times. Some people, with amnesia who are old school wrestling fans say, "Oh God, the thigh slapping." Chris Adams slapped the hell out of his thigh every time he did the super kick. It didn't matter. It's awesome. I would love when he would hit
perfection.
And then when he would hit this and sometimes do that like forward roll kip up right afterwards too, just the best. What a visually pleasing move that, like you said, it is unreal that we're 40 years, 41 years, 42 years after this, and still no one can do a super kick like him. No one can even come close.
That's what makes me think the level of difficulty in how he delivers this has to be off the charts, because it looks so much cooler than just a regular super kick that the level of difficulty must be just so great because nobody has done it.
I'm sure people have tried to have workshopped and haven't been able to. And I'm sure you talk about the level of difficulty, traveling that distance, the like bicycle pump style, and then hitting it and doing that safely and not hurting your opponent, not Goldberging someone. It has to be difficult, but he pulls it off. Like, I've never seen him. All the times I remember him doing as a kid, all the times we've seen here on the podcast, it always looks great. He nails it the exact same way every single time.
Garvin to the apron. Adams tries to suplex him in. Precious grabs Adams' leg, tripping him. Garvin lands on top. Only a 2 count. I bought this as a finish. This is a great near fall that got me.
Yeah, this 100% I bought as the finish. This is the Ultimate Warrior Rick Rude 1989 Intercontinental title spot here that was a finish 6 years later. Here it's a great near fall.
Sunshine chases Precious around the ring. Sunshine gets on the apron. Garvin goes to hit the ropes. Sunshine grabs Garvin by the hair, pulls him down. He lands right on the back of his head. Adams jumps on top of him, gets the pin. Adams is your winner, and he is the new champion. Garvin takes a swing at Sunshine. She ends up ducking and tackling Precious. Adams and Sunshine celebrate in the ring with the title, New American Heavyweight Champion.
What a scene. The crowd absolutely loses their mind. Again, they're into Adams pretty much every bit as much as Von Erich here, winning, obviously. Sunshine, she's nuts. She even slaps referee David Manning for no good reason. He just takes it and raises Adams' arm anyway. The other thing about this, didn't this go on for a long time still? Because I think on that Parade of Champions 84 show that we watched, there was a mixed tag match right before the Flair Carey Von Erich
right.
Match. This went on for a long time, but again, like not anything groundbreaking or mind-blowing in ring outside of just Adams doing the super kick, which is always great. But man, like just you get a sense through this entire show and in this match, like how 100% locked in their audience was to these characters, to these stories. They were living and breathing and dying with every single thing that happened. This is the type of thing that on a dying era territory show would not have been that good, and maybe would have even felt a little bit groan worthy. But here, with how over everyone is and the crowd reaction and the performances and like Jim Garvin being so great, there was one moment early in the match where he's got Adams in a neck vice, and he's in the corner pointed directly towards Sunshine, and he just cackles in the most ridiculous way, ha ha ha, and points at her. And it's just like that sort of just pro wrestling ridiculousness with the crowd fervor like it was made this just a delight to watch.
Favorite thing on this show for you?
Man, it's tough to say. I have no objectivity about this era, like 83, 84 world class, because it's what made me a wrestling fan along with Mid-South. But I love the surprise as much as like seeing the Sportatorium whenever we see it is such like a comfort food thing for me. Like I just love seeing that building and just seeing TV from there. But this being a big arena show with big main events from Reunion Arena, and that we get to see that, in a 1 hour TV show. Super, super fun. If I had to pick one thing, I would say all the little things that Terry Gordy did in that match with Kevin Von Erich, just so fun.
Yeah, definitely of the times, like you mentioned. But man, yeah, just a super talent there. And I just anytime the Von Erichs were doing anything and the place was going insane. What a great visual. What a great moment in time to parachute into and just take a look at, you're right in the middle of Freebird's Von Erichs here. And the territory is white hot, can do nothing wrong. And so everybody loves all the baby faces, even if you're not a Von Erich, and, and they hate all the heels. This is just it was a super fun, really fun episode of random, this is just a randomly chosen show, fantastic one to get and to parachute into.
When it passes that test that we always talk about of if you had never watched wrestling before or never seen this territory before, and you happen to be flipping through the channels, in the era that this happened, and this came on and you watched it, I cannot fathom any scenario where I wouldn't be hooked deeply, wanting to see all of these characters, see all these stories, see how they played out each and every week. It's just tremendous television.
Worst thing on this show?
Man, that's honestly...
This was hard. I couldn't think of it.
Honestly can't think of anything, because Bill Mercer, even to this few screw-ups, is such a great shepherd of the show, just taking you through all the action. He's the only person on commentary. He does a tremendous job multiple times on this show of catching you up as to all the things that happened in any of these stories leading to these matches. Also doing a great job of telling us what's going to be coming up on, the following week's show. I really can't think of anything. I guess here's the one thing I didn't like on the show. Again, this is me being overly pedantic copy editor. Kimala spelling instead of Kimala. If that's the worst thing you can think of, it was a pretty damn good hour of television.
Yeah, really. We got a finish in the first match. We didn't get a finish in the second match, but the Von Erichs defeated Kimala, and then and you got a finish in the third match and a title change. So it's really hard to find anything to not like about this show, which is pretty wild to think about.
And again, we can't reiterate enough as we close this out how different this is from almost every other territory at the time. Absolutely. That you get to see here 3 of the biggest matches from the big arena show that I'm sure on television they had spent all the weeks building to try to get you to, pay your money, buy your ticket, and go and watch. Here, it's almost like modern times where you have the build on TV and then you actually get to see the big match on pay-per-view. Here you got it on TV. Just very, very different and very refreshing. So often when we watch those territory shows, it's always building to matches that sound so exciting that we'll never get to see because they never aired. They were maybe recorded and they showed highlights of, or they're just sitting away rotting in a vault in the WWE headquarters. This was so cool to actually get to see the big matches.
If you want to see more of us, you should go subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's where you could see Adam wearing his world-class shirt right now.
Yes, you can see I'm going out from the microphone stand here so you can see it, the classic world-class logo. I got this shirt last year and was so happy to finally have a high-quality world-class logo shirt. 3-year-old Adam is very proud of 43-year-old Adam.
The YouTube channel is where you can get the video version of this podcast, watching us talk about the show. If you don't consume your podcast via video, that's okay. But if you could throw us a subscribe over there, helps us work the algorithm so other wrestling fans can find the show. And make sure you're subscribed to the podcast via any podcatcher of choice. If you consume via your audio means only, you can go through the entire back catalog. We referenced a bunch of different world-class episodes. We referenced a bunch of other episodes on this podcast. They're free right now. The same way you're listening to this show, they're all available in the back catalog. Evergreen content. So it's just as new as the day that it came out. So go ahead and give those a listen. And if you want to support the show and get even more, you're like, I've already listened to all those episodes. Thanks. What about me? Well, I'm glad you're back. Thanks for listening. And you can go get 200 plus more bonus episodes over on the bonus feed, patreon.com/wrestlingatRandom. For $5, it unlocks the entire back catalog of those episodes where we mentioned a bunch of the Parade of Champions, a bunch of other stuff. Most of it is chosen by patrons who go and support the show and make picks of lists, shows, and whatever. We'll tell you all about it. Go visit patreon.com/wrestlingatRandom. Or if you're an Apple Podcast subscriber, you can just hit the subscribe button right there. It unlocks all the bonus content right in your Apple Podcast feed as well. And with that, we are going to wrap it up. We're going to call it a podcast. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, World Class. And thank you, Randomizer. This brought me back to my earliest memories of professional wrestling. I will never, ever complain about getting to watch and talk about World Class with you. Yeah, can't wait to see what the Randomizer will bring us next week.
Follow us on all the social media platforms at WrestleAtRandom. And, of course, WrestlingAtRandom.com has all the links in the entire back catalog I described. And I want to thank everyone for listening. We'll talk to you again next time.